Okay. Hello, everyone. So yeah, just given the audience, let's cut much of the introduction of why it's important to measure people online, and let's assume that that's important, right? So once we have this debate, normally as researchers we say, well, we could be using self-reports as we have done normally, and that is very convenient, but we know that has some biases. Another option that these days have, thanks to the plethora of digital data available online, is to use web tracking data. For those that haven't been in my talks already 100 times and have seen this slide that is coming maybe another 100 times, what is web tracking data? Um, it's any data that comes from tracking technologies that we ask participants to install on their devices. And then once we have them, that allows us to know what people see, the apps that they use, and how they interact with the internet, right? So once we have these different options, we can think, okay, web tracking data seems pretty good. It's observational data. But one of the drawbacks when you have this data is, well, it's untested. We simply are assuming this is good data. We don't know whether this is the case or not. So in this context, where we have this idea that, yes, great, this data is going to be completely unbiased, but we don't know, let's change all of our surveys for this observational data, we have to think that web tracking data is not perfect. And it's good if we assume that because there was not much research, but thank God someone spent 4 years of their life writing a PhD on these. And so, wow, there's many problems in there. And that doesn't mean it's not good. It simply means that once you have two competitive, competing sources of data, let's check their data quality, their psychometric properties, and with that, let's make informed decisions. So this is what this presentation is about. One approach in which we can find a way of comparing this data is by having an approach to measure their measurement quality at the same time for the same concepts. And just a refresher on this is just a pretty basic idea of what is measurement quality. In the framework of the total survey error framework, and in the framework more specifically of the true score of Willem Saris and colleagues, what we think is we want to measure a concept, either with a survey or with any other measurement instrument. Then we have a measurement that has specific properties, so we assume that measure in a perfect scenario would not have any random errors. And then we have something that we observe that might be affected by random errors. The relationship between the concept and that true score is what we call validity. The relationship between the observed variable and the true score is what we call reliability in this framework, and the product is the quality. So it's simply the strength of the relationship between what we observe and what we want to observe. That's simply what it means in this case when I talk about quality. The model is this one. This is simply an adaptation of something that has been done for decades, the multi-trait-multi-method approach. In this case, the only variation that we do is that what we consider method is not different competing survey questions, but different ways of measuring that with data sources. So as you see, we measure 3 different concepts that could be the types of news that people read with 2 different data sources, surveys and web tracking data. And you build this model in which you have 6 observations for 2 or 3 traits and 2 methods and their respective true scores. And with that, you can build what I was telling. You can have an expectation of what is their validity, reliability, and finally, their quality. And this is not something new that I came up on a dream. Other people, such as Daniel Aversky and Stephanie here, have also worked on this for administrative data and web tracking data. And other colleagues I know are working on this right now. So this is something that we're trying to do, adapt something pretty old school for new data sources and see how it works. In this study, I did this using individual level tracking data combined with a survey that we obtained through the opt-in panel NetQuest in Spain. And this is within the ERC project, Web Data Op by Melanie Revilla. And just to specify, this is data that comes from both mobile devices and desktops. And we built 3 different models for things that people normally do online: consumption of news, consumption of different communication things such as social media, instant messaging or emails, and then entertainment behavior such as video platforms, streaming, and TV and movies. So different things that people are using web tracking data for, things that people are not using web tracking for data for, and things that can have different problems that we will discuss later. And essentially, we measure this with survey questions that ask them to report their hours and minutes directly, which is something that we know is questionable. And with web tracking data, this was simply a mean of the total time that they spend during a month on a specific list of apps and URLs that we define ourselves. So pretty basic stuff. And just to be sure, I use the log of these measures to take into account the weird distribution that sometimes these variables have. So let's go to the results. Our expectation, coming from everything that we have seen in the few decades, should be impressive performance by web tracking data. Let's ditch surveys. Well, if you look at the top row, that's measurement quality, and that's what I'm going to be focused on. When it comes to news, pretty poor performance, to be fair. We see measurement qualities are substantially low than survey questions, and actually very poor. Surveys are not really working exceptionally well, but it's the performance that goes more in the direction of what we have seen in the literature before, just average or semi-good. This could mean that we identify news in a pretty poor way. When it comes to communication, it works very well. Do you want to measure social media? Do you want to measure emails or other ways that people communicate? The quality is pretty high, but that's also similarly true for the surveys. So it's not that we have a huge gain in that case. And for entertainment, we see very different things. When it comes to measuring what people look on YouTube and streaming services, pretty well. Smart TVs, what they watch with mobile TV streaming or with audio, so if they are listening to podcasts, we have a big problem. But that makes sense because Spotify, other platforms like these, they run in the background. That's something that you cannot capture. You only capture the app or the URL that is on the screen at the moment. And when it comes to watching TV, as we have seen, people can watch it on devices that this specific technology, not like the technology that has been presented before, cannot track. We don't track smart TVs. So conclusions. This really puts into question, as I have been saying for the last few years, this idea that the data is unbiased, the web tracking data is unbiased, and that surveys should be replaced by this kind of data. And that's not really true for communication video streamings. We do very well, but it's really, really, really true for what we have been using web tracking data the most. That is to measure what the news that people read and how long they are spending reading news. And surveys really, in a way, validate the results that we find here. That's what Alwyn, that's what other researchers have been showing for the last decades. These are results that are not perfect, but are quite stable and that we can predict well. And yeah, as I said, I can dig more into why I think that these results make sense and what might be driving these problems in the questions. Thanks a lot.